Hey, welcome to BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. As promised, we have two special guests. Drive safe, Dave. And I'm going to tell you, we're not worthy. We continue to not be worthy of who's on our show.
Yeah, we've got serious experts and well-known individuals coming on the show today. I've been working on having some hard-pressing questions so that we, Rick, can look smart.
You know, the more people we have on here and the more quality people, it just shows you that we really have nothing to offer in this industry. Nothing to offer.
Except a platform.
All right, well, we're going to bring on David Heller, Executive Vice President of Government Affairs with the TCA, and Adam Blanchard. Adam, a trucking owner. Owns a trucking company. He also serves on a couple of seats, right, with the TXTA on the making rules, whatever that is, right, Adam?
Yep, yes, sir. The Emerging Leaders Council. I serve on the chair of the Highway Policy Committee with Dave Heller as well with TCA, which is a great organization. So excited to be on, and excited to be on with Dave. He's usually the one that corrects me about the things that I say are wrong.
Wow. Dave is he continues to be the most recognized guest on BCB Live. You know, now like 4 or 5 times. You know, the big window now. He's now starting to distance himself from others on the show. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks, and I just got to come on here more because every time I come on here, you guys make me feel better about my day. So you guys be a great alarm clock. You know, I start out the day.
Well, that's what we're here for. We're here to just make people feel good, and as long as we can continue to do that. Here we are. We actually brought you two experts in today to discuss some very important topics that we saw, and we think that you guys, as the all-knowing, but also tend to have the great ear going across the country on what's going across this industry, we want to discuss and talk to first.
Yeah, so for certain, Adam, when we were in, we were at an insurance meeting a couple weeks ago, I believe, when the Supreme Court made the call that said, hey, you know what? We're not going to hear this right now. And it led us to believe that, you know what, that means maybe it'll get pushed to October. And then 2 days later, David, I want you to speak to this. 2 days later, they come out and say, hey, we're not going to comment on it. Hey, what's the difference what was the difference in the way that approach went?
You know, when you talk about it, there is a difference, right? When it first started and they said, hey, we're not going to comment on it at this time, it left, industry was saying, okay, well, there's still an opportunity for them to hear it, or there's still an opportunity for the courts to take that up. And when the Supreme Court says that, you know, that's all great news. And then when they said, we will not be commenting on it, we will not be hearing the case, it was almost like a mic drop moment. Like, hey, drop the mic, it's over, there's our opportunity, and now here's the rule. AB 5 is being pushed forth in the state of California, and we as an industry are adjusting the operations to how that will fit when we deliver freight in California, if you're based in California. And that becomes that big thing, is that real apparent news or that opportunity that we were hoping the courts would take up is now gone, and we're faced with AB 5 as a rule once that preliminary injunction will be lifted.
So, David, let's talk about AB 5 really quickly. It's pretty much a 3-part test, an ABC test, and what we're really focusing in on that B part, and that is that the worker performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. Speak to that specifically and how that affects this industry as a whole out there in California.
And that becomes that big case, right? Is that B prong is demonstrating that you're hauling freight for a trucking company that hauls freight, and why is that really necessary? And that's the hard part to satisfy it. And you have to understand this: the independent contractor business model has been a tremendous success in this industry for decades, if you will, and was responsible for the development of hundreds, if not thousands, of successful businesses across this country. So jeopardizing that and changing the way that model is implemented because of that one B prong is certainly going to have a triple effects across the country. And California in and of itself has a greater GDP than a lot of nations in the world. So in saying the freight there is not important, especially as it serves the ports, becomes the biggest issue. So satisfying that or changing that principle certainly will reflect the way businesses do their operations across this country, not just in the state of California, because a lot of freight does go in and out of California on a timely basis, and the independent contractor business model is one that is used on a regular daily basis.
Adam, you're a business owner, a trucking company owner, deals with independent contractors. Hey, talk to us a little bit about that. Hey, what are your views from the AB5 as a business owner?
Well, I think it's incredibly disappointing. I mean, there is a reason that we have federal laws, and federal laws preempt state laws, right? So I practiced law actually for 4 or 5 years before I started my trucking company. So I tell people all the time I was a crummy lawyer, so I'm a broke trucker now, but it just gives me a really unique insight into kind of understanding these issues. And I think what we're going to see now is a huge ripple effect. I mean, we have basically the unions have been driving this train, which was the passage of AB5 out in California with the unions and ports wanting these drivers. And unfortunately, now we're going to start having a rippling effect throughout the country. The Supreme Court, I've seen historically, and I think we saw from this last session they had with their Second Amendment and the Roe v. Wade, I mean, they have a pulse on what issues are important to our country and issues that they need to address. The supply chain crisis is everybody here knows and the listeners know, is really at the forefront of a lot of the economic turmoil we're having in the country, and the fact that they didn't take this up. Very disappointing, and I think what we're going to have to start looking at now as an industry, I'm looking at as a business owner, is how do we start dealing with this? Because you're going to start seeing more and more states. As we all know, it kind of starts on the West Coast and up in the Northeast, and then unfortunately, a lot of these political issues like AB5 start working their way towards the center of the country. And so I think we need to start identifying how we're going to handle it for the operations in California as it stands today. But I think you're going to see Oregon, Washington, New York, New Jersey, these other states start implementing similar legislation, and we're going to have to go battle it in the state legislatures, just like we're doing tort reform is the way I see it going forward.
And as we talk about this, and I heard you say, and I agree with you 100% about being disappointing. Here we are, we're talking about 70,000, I think in California, I think I read a number of 70,000 independent owner operators in that state. Where do they go? Let's talk. This is no easy solution to this problem by passing this bill. Here we've got independent owner operators with their own businesses, in their own truck payments and their own livelihoods and their own promise of a dream of this country. Where do they go? Well, let's talk about that for a second. Where do these people go right now in order to figure out this, come up with a genuine working solution and not crush their dream?
Well, I think we've already started to see it, and Dave can speak to this with some of the membership of TCA, but you've seen a lot of the larger carriers start pulling all owner-operators out of the state of California. The problem is you don't have to be based in California for them to try to get their hooks in you. And I think that's what we're going to start seeing is they're going to start going after motor carriers with owner operators. And really, to your point, you start off as a company driver, right? Median salary for truck drivers right now is $54,000 a year. You move up, you have an opportunity to go buy your own truck, start have a small fleet like with ours. I mean, we have our owner operators that are probably making about $150,000 a year, and a lot of them don't just have one truck, they have multiple trucks. I mean, it is the definition of the American dream. It's the same thing that Travis and I did with Double Diamond. We started with one truck and one trailer. So I think what we're going to start seeing is some real issues within the supply chain within these states, because you can't just move across state lines, I don't think, and still continue to operate within the state of California without having some fallout here. So I think you're going to start seeing these owner operators going with fleets that I would imagine are probably going to start operating outside the state of California. Dave, you could probably speak to it from some of our larger carriers in our membership that have already started doing this.
Yeah, Dave, I want you to speak on behalf of the TCA. What are you hearing from the members on that? And then also, you're up in Washington. What is that pulse like for what happened with the AB5 in Washington?
Well, and that's a great question. And first and foremost, one of the biggest concerns is, Dave, you said it yourself, you've got 70,000 independent contractors in the state of California. And it's not a simple switch. You just don't turn it over in one night and say automatically they're employee drivers. No, there's a lot of headaches and a lot of changes that have to go into effect. Like, what do you do with their equipment? Because these drivers, guess what, own their own trucks as independent contractors, and company drivers will drive company trucks. So the question or the concern is do these drivers actually say, I've had enough and I'm just getting out of the industry? Which isn't good for anybody considering the supply chain crisis that our nation is currently operating in. So certainly those effects or those stories are going to be told in the halls of Washington sooner rather than later as we start taking our Hill visits. And I know we're planning Hill visits later this month to go downtown and talk about AB5 and talk about that with our legislators and say this isn't good for anybody, especially in the midst of the supply chain crisis. And let's be honest, right? We've always had a driver shortage in this country. And the question becomes is it wasn't that apparent. And then when you start seeing empty shelves across the country at most of your major retailers, then it becomes a really big issue. And all of a sudden, you don't get your toilet paper in a manner in which you wanted, or you see something that you just don't have that you're used to having on a regular basis. And if you start having an independent contractor leave the industry en masse because of a rule like this, then it becomes even more problematic. Certainly, there is a home for them working for carriers. I think every carrier would enjoy the fact they have qualified drivers that they would bring on their fleet. But the real question is whether these independent contractors are going to just sit there and say, why do I want to start my own business and become a success in an industry or a nation that doesn't necessarily truly want me, as these rules, as Adam said, start to spread across the country. California is the first step, right? And you start have to looking at West Coast states, Washington, Oregon. And then inevitably, you've got East Coast states. New Jersey had already talked about previously and wanting to see how this shakes out. And there's opportunity for something like this to be put forward in New Jersey and inevitably Massachusetts. So looking at the lay of the land, that's not good for anybody in this industry.
How are these, and as we talk about this, and I don't think I've actually witnessed this, how are we going to implement this and enforce this rule as it stands today when the injunction is lifted here, who knows when? How is this going to be genuinely enforced across the country? I mean, there in California.
I was hoping you had that answer because I think nobody else does. I think everybody's going to sit here and wonder, how is this enforced? This magical B prong of the ABC test is, this isn't something that, you can do like regular enforcement in the trucking industry. It can't be done at the roadside. It becomes more of an investigation type of situation, followed by litigation, where you have plaintiffs' attorneys that will eventually get involved in something like this. And that's that enforcement opportunity. It's not going to be a roadside inspector saying, well, geez, do you satisfy the B prong test of the ABC test to prove that you're a true independent contractor? It doesn't work that way. And that's the problematic part of this is enforcement is going to be so ambiguous until it reaches any potential litigation. And again, Adam's the attorney out here. We all know we can call him for bail money and represent us at different times, but at the same point, he can probably answer these questions more so when it comes to these types of litigation.
Hey, Adam, I want your comments on that. And then also, you said something earlier. I also want you to comment on, when do companies, say based out of Texas, when are they scared to send their independent contractors to California now with freight?
Yes, so I'll speak to the first point, to what Dave was commenting on in your question about how is this enforced. I think what we're probably going to see long term is you're going to have your Department of Labor, your EOC, those groups, your comptrollers, depending on who the enforcement regulator is in the state for wage and hour related claims. I think you're going to start seeing more of those audits, which are incredibly expensive. You've got to get your attorneys involved. You have to get your accountants involved. And look, 88% of trucking companies have 5 or fewer trucks. And so between, audits that I think we're going to have on misclassification of drivers, that's going to happen from a governmental standpoint. And then, look, we're already in a lawsuit abuse environment right now that's putting people out of business every day throughout the country. I mean, we need tort reform relief in our industry. I mean, in Texas, for instance, every other billboard is some trial lawyer asking if they've been hit by a big truck, causing our insurance rates to go up 30-40%. And so what we're probably going to see next from the trial lawyers bar is there is a particular practice area on wage and hour claims where you're going to have these vulture of trial lawyers going throughout these states and trying to round up plaintiffs, and they're going to turn around and start suing trucking companies for misclassification. They're going to ask for back wages. They're going to ask for attorney's fees, and I think we're going to just perpetuate an even worse litigation environment and abusive environment that we already have right now. And so I think that ultimately we're going to be in a position where we're just going to have to let bad policy start crippling the supply chain to a point that the citizens of these respective states step up and say, look, we got to fix this. And I'm afraid that's where it's going in California and the other states that start implementing this. And I think to your other question, what do we start doing with these independent contractors? I mean, we don't hire anybody that lives or is domiciled in California that has a California driver's license. We implemented that policy from the moment that AB 5 was enacted, even though it was enjoined and stopped by the courts. It's just too much risk. I mean, we are a 3 to 5% profit margin industry. There's just not a whole lot of juice left to squeeze here. And by having drivers that are living in California, that have the driver's license in California, I think you're going to have a lot of these companies stop hiring them, and I think you're going to see a further exodus of more and more people out of California.
But to the company, Adam, that is, say, based out of Texas, that services California and uses independent contractors for that, is there anything on that they should be concerned with, or is that a later on problem?
I think that Scopelitis does a good job of representing our industry. They always send out information. I haven't practiced law for many years. I can tell you that I'm going to start getting with my attorneys. We don't currently run in and out of California, but if we do in the future, and I think to your listeners that do run in and out of California, we're going to have to start having some conversations with attorneys that really understand this. And really, at the end of the day, this is an area that's unknown, and it's going to take lawsuits and just experience, good and bad, trying these cases in California to see what they can do to get their hooks in us. But you can bet your bottom dollar that the government of California, their regulators, their wage and hour regulator is going to start coming after people that operate there, whether it's on the number of miles they run there or whatever it is. They're going to have some kind of a nexus of that company based in Texas. If we operate in California, they're going to claim that we have some kind of nexus to California, and therefore we have to abide by it, which once again is going to have to go through the federal court system to see how it shakes out. So it's just created a huge amount of uncertainty it's just really unfortunate right now, because we're doing everything we can to just get everybody their milk and bread and medicine. And I think this is going to throw a huge wrench in this chain, especially with all the crisis we've seen at the port of Long Beach.
Hey, David, I'll let you go first on this one. Is it too late? I mean, what do we, the trucking companies, the independent contractors, trucking companies in California, outside of California, what now? I mean, is there any hope? Do we write to our congressmen or state representatives, or we just throw in the flag?
Oh, of course, right? I mean, that's always the hope of the thought process is never hesitate to not use your voice. And I always encourage that. I always support that aspect of it, and do so. Write to your congressmen and women, write to your representatives, your senators, or even at the state level, and do that. If you're in the state of California, explain how it's going to affect your business and how it can affect the country or nation or state as a whole. And this becomes problematic. Always use your voice. There's no doubt about it, and talk about that to those that regulate, to those that legislate. So in hopes that something like this can be overturned, or something like this can be changed. That's the reason they're there, and they study the effects of things like that will have on business and have on the general public as a whole. So use that voice and make sure you're taking advantage of the opportunities that this country affords you, and be in contact with your representatives at the state and federal level, and talk about that. I know we're going to be doing that. I can tell you all the other trucking industry associations will be doing that, and having that very conversation on what to do now and where this goes and how this isn't good for anybody.
Gotcha. Adam, speak specific to the TXTA, a state association. I mean, what can we do, or what is TXTA doing to make sure this is getting addressed?
Well, first off, in the state of Texas, we're going to continue to fight as an association at the state and legislative level to really codify the multi-factor test that we have here in the state of Texas. And so I think that's what we're going to do here in Texas, is ensure that we don't in the future end up with the ABC test, because employee classification, every state has a different test. There's around 3 or 4 or 5 of them out there, ABC being one of them. The one in the state of Texas is a 8 to 12 factor test. And so I think what we're going to have to start doing, and I think to your listeners, it's going to be important, we're going to have to address this issue like we're addressing lawsuit abuse reform. Everybody needs to go join their state associations, their national associations. We need to get coordinated as an industry. We're going to have to start taking this fight to the state legislature, into Congress. And we're either the best possible outcome would be for us to change this at the federal level with TCA and ATA and other organizations up there that we're all part of, and try to get some legislation passed at the federal level that would preempt this. But if we don't, what the Supreme Court has indicated is that this is a state issue. We're going to let them decide. And if that's the case, we got to get coordinated as state associations and start taking this fight to the state legislature and ensure that we don't have the ABC test.
You know, we sit here and we talk about this, and I think the general public as a whole, and I'm going to say not just trucking, the industry is well aware of the situation, but I truly don't believe that the general public as a whole in the news fully understands the impact, the negative impact this is going to have on our country. And you know, they all have heard the word supply chain. Guess what? I truly believe this is going to notch that up a level when they understand that it's not there, and it's going to almost be broken when this occurs out on the West Coast. Let's talk to the state. I wanted to bring up something very important that we had discussed earlier, and this was the tragedy that occurred in San Antonio and gave trucking a little bit of a black eye. And I know that it's not based solely on trucking, but anytime you see an 18-wheeler involved in a tragedy, it seems for the general public to look at trucking industry as a whole to be a part of that tragedy. And let's speak specifically to what transpired as these illegals were picked up on the American side of the border in stash houses and then transported. They weren't brought directly across on a truck. They were actually picked up and trafficked within the borders of the United States, and then we were dealt with that tragedy there. What is the TXTA doing to affect change in these outcomes that we're seeing?
Well, I mean, look, we're based in San Antonio, and what a tragedy. I mean, first and foremost, our hearts go out to those families and those individuals that were affected by this. It's devastating, and what we're doing in the state of Texas is we're continuing to work with DPS. We're working with the governor's office. Governor Abbott has come out and said he's going to start having more checkpoints within the state of Texas to try to stop these types of things from happening. I mean, this isn't the first time it's happened, and I'm afraid unless we start getting some, real legislative relief at the federal level dealing with immigration reform, and border security and these types of things, we're going to continue to see these types of issues transpire. When you leave Laredo, which is the largest inland port in the United States, large majority of the exports coming out of Mexico come through Laredo. There's a checkpoint north of Laredo. So not only do you go through the 3 checkpoints coming into the United States, but once you leave Laredo going north, there's another checkpoint there. These criminals are smart. What they're doing is they're loading people up past these checkpoints. And so we're going to continue to work closely with DPS. We're going to work closely with the governor's office to help provide as much support as we can to them in increasing, awareness and DPS being able to identify these throughout the state. But I mean, as an industry and from a TXTA standpoint, I'd rather say probably from my standpoint, so speaking on their behalf of this, but what I'm about to say, but I don't have an issue with our trucks run through a few more checkpoints in order to ensure that lives like this are saved. I mean, we have, a jobs crisis in the United States. We've been based on an immigrant workforce forever. We got to have immigration reform, but until we get that done, we've got to continue to support our law enforcement, first responders, and doing what we've got to do as an industry, as corporate stewards, to keep these tragedies from happening. We're part of Truckers Against Trafficking. Our company is, and I would encourage listeners to really look into that. Great training program for your drivers there, helping identify signs of this and then reporting it to law enforcement. So we got to continue to be good corporate stewards and work with law enforcement to stop it from happening in the future.
Yeah, big believer that we, the trucking industry, man, we have eyes and ears all over the place. And when we see something that doesn't look right, we've got to make that phone call. We encourage you again. We're, big believers, and we've had Truckers Against Trafficking on the show. We're both members of that as well. Do your part as a driver, as a trucking company, as a human, to make sure you call those in. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for being on BCB Live. Man, what a great, great group, and what a phenomenal amount of knowledge each of you have, especially when you combine you two together. It's like one big brain.
I'm just feeling all the knowledge just rain. You're just raining it down on us over here. But I'll tell you what, I truly appreciate the conversation. I want the conversation to continue,
yes,
both up on the Hill, both in the state, And I think that as we talk across the industry, we need to let other people know the plight that we're facing when it comes to this situation. Me, as a former owner-operator myself, what a horrible way to strip an American dream away from an entire generation. I mean, I truly believe that you are robbing an entire generation of an American dream. And it is devastating, and I don't believe enough people understand or know of the situation that is occurring out in California.
Yeah, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. That's the perfect way to put it. This is a threat against the American dream, against the opportunity to start your own business and be your own boss and set your own schedule. And this is what that is the majority of truckload carriers on the road today started out just like that. One truck, one route, and grew it from there. And this is a certain demonstrable threat against that actual business model. I agree wholeheartedly.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to do something we've never done before. And here it is. David, we're going to start with you, and then Adam following that. David, you're going to say your name, who you're with, and then Adam, you're going to say your name, who you're with, and then together, this is going to take teamwork. You're going to say, you've been watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. David, start it.
Oh, this is going to be good.
This can't miss. This is David Heller. I'm with the Truckload Carriers Association.
Yep, my name's Adam Blanchard, and I'm with Double Diamond Transport.
And you've been watching
BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.
Hey, gentlemen, we appreciate you. God bless. Stay safe. Continue what you're doing. Listen to me. If you're out there right now, you're watching this show, join your state association.
Correct.
Join the TCA. Get involved with your trucking associations. They do make a difference. Y'all stay safe out there.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank y'all.